So, very good evening, friends. Meeting again a session of Robert's philosophy, and we have discussed two chapters from syphilitic miasm. Earlier chapter, it was explanation of syphilitic miasm and how it presents at every level, right from the head to toe. So everywhere how this syphilitic miasm presents, and then in the next chapter he has compared the syphilitic miasm in relation with the sorosyphilitic miasm, that is the tubercular miasm. And what are the differences? How it reflects, how there is a dominance of sometimes soric miasm over the syphilitic miasm in case of tubercular miasm, or sometimes syphilitic dominance over the soric miasm. Everything, every point regarding it, he has tried to explain over there. So see, this is the differentiation. If one reads it again and again, then he will understand exactly the depth of the miasm. And this is too much needed. Once you understand this, definitely you'll acknowledge, yes, how to look toward the cases. What are the remedies which we must think according to the miasm? And then our results definitely gets very good. So this is the importance of understanding the miasm. Second important thing from Robert's miasm, you can learn his intelligence. So how he looks towards the miasm. In earlier chapter, one of his hypotheses which we have discussed in Sora or deficiency. In this series of syphilis, he has again made one postulate, and that postulate is that higher the atomic weight of the element, more syphilitic is the remedy. So this is what we have to learn in this specific chapter. Again, he tries his level best to explain it in relation with the periodic table. So let us start with the chapter number 28, syphilis. We have spoken of soric miasm as being closely related to the deficiency diseases so-called. Now, on the same basis of the table of the atomic weights in relation to the disease conditions, we are considering the problem of venereal taint, syphilis, and psychosis. Just as we find the remedies preeminently antisoric in the lower register of atomic weights below 53. This is what we have learned. Atomic weight below 53, they are the part and parcel of human constitution. And those elements, whenever lacks their, they are lacked in their food, in the food, and deficiency develops. Whatever the symptoms produces, those matches with the soric miasm, and that's what his postulate was there when Sora or deficiency chapter he has written. And just as we find these closely related to the constructive elements in living tissue, so we find the elements with the highest powers of destruction in the upper and highest registers of atomic weight. It is to be remembered that the constructive elements are, as Millikan states, in their state of maximum stability already. They have no energy to give up in disintegrating process. They can only be broken apart by working upon them or by supplying energy to them. So those constructive elements never gets destructed by themselves. They are fixed, they are rigid, and that's why they never get self-destruction, self-disintegration. If you want to remove or you want to bring about the energy from them, then you have to utilize external power and then you can release the energy. So they never themselves never directly releases their energy, and that's why they takes part in the construction of the human being, not in the destruction. So the elements which are having atomic weight less than 53, they are stable, more stable as comparative to the higher atomic weights, and that's why there is no self destruction happens over there. However, when we consider the radioactive elements, we find the problem an entirely different one, and necessarily their homeopathic field of action will be different. So when you go higher atomic weight, where you're going to find it out radioactive elements more commonly. You know that you have learned in the chemistry, you have learned in the physics that whenever these radioactive elements are there, they are throwing away their energy, and that's why they are called as a radioactive element because they throws the rays outside and getting self disintegrated. Disintegration, self-destruction is nothing but the syphilitic miasm. We cannot expect construction from essentially destructive forces so long as they remain in their natural state. So they never takes part in the construction of the human being as because they are destructive in their action. Millikan tells us that process of radioactive disintegration is a process that can take place only in a case of very few of the heavy elements. That radioactivity is heat evolving exothermic process. That it is self-destructive in that it gives off itself in the process, and after this process has continued a sufficient length of time, the original substance is itself changed. It has become more inert and has less and less radioactive properties and powers. We are told that uranium, after it has discharged its alpha particles for considerable period of time, geologically considered, has become so much lighter in atomic weight that we recognize it as a thorium. See, when this uranium, we know it is a radioactive element. This radioactive element is continuously throwing the rays outside, leaving its energy. And when after a long period, its atomic weight becomes less because it is throwing away an energy. And when it has been thrown away its energy, then gradually it goes on reducing its atomic weight, and same uranium gets converted into thorium. Thorium is again a same radioactive element. It is a conversion of uranium to the thorium. And when thorium throws away all those things, so what he says further is very important. This eventually worn down to the radium. So thorium, when throws away its rays continuously, it also becomes more or less in atomic weight, to which we label by the name of radium. And this in turn disintegrates to the lead. So see, from uranium, then it becomes thorium, thorium becomes radium, radium becomes lead. The radioactivity is completely stopped. But atomic weight becomes more and more less in the self-destructive process. And this is what he wants to tell you, that as you go with these remedies, all those remedies are more destructive. They never takes part in construction of human being. They takes part in the disintegration destructive forces. And that's why those remedies are syphilitic remedies, and we have to use them in syphilitic type of diseases. Thus, we see that these radioactive elements have no choice. They cannot rest in their ceaseless self-destruction, and they cannot come in contact with other substances without in turn destroying them. So this is the thing of with the radioactive element. They are self-destructive forces, and they are going down, 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 down to a level when they are changed into another element because of self-destruction. We have stated that syphilis is the only miasm or stigma that actually destroys living tissue. So syphilis miasm destructs the tissue. This is what we learn, and we know that. It destroys not only the soft tissues but bony tissues and attacks the very life of the unborn child. So it is self-destructive process is not only with the soft tissues, but it is up to the bone. The bones gets disintegrated, bone gets degenerated. And that's why in syphilitic miasmatic diseases, you get the osteomyelitis. It is a disease degenerative process. Then osteoarthritis, spondylosis. All those degenerative processes comes under the sphere of this specific miasm. If he has also mentioned attacks the very life of the unborn child. If it has been there in the parent or if it is there in the mother, the syphilitic miasm, the unborn child also carries that, and many times there are many congenital defects with which the child can born. Cleft palate, imperforated anus, myelomeningocele. There are many more, and those destructive processes are because of this miasm. If after repeated abortions, a child is born to a parent having this marked taint, we frequently find The tissue so disturbed by the attack of disease that it were better the child had died. There are many things which happens in this myelin. Most important thing which is explaining over there, that there generally syphilitic parents have a tendency to abortion. Their pregnancy never remains normal, and occasionally, if it remains, it the child born with many more congenital disorders, and then that parents feels that it would be better than that child would have died earlier. This is the problem of this syphilitic stigma. If the child is not actually disfigured and attains the age of puberty, we are sure to find this cruel stamp upon it. The symptoms of this miasm, as they appear all down its trail, have been stated in detail previously. Now we have to consider the chemical affinity of certain elements to the disease state. In other words, foreordained homeopathicity. So he is explaining over there this child who is not having any disorder, but after till he goes to the mature age, he develops many more problems. And this is the tendency which happens. This miasm transmitted transplacentally and affects this newly born child. Second thing, the symptoms of this miasm as they appear all down its trail have been stated in detail previously. We have learned those in last two chapters, the syphilitic symptom. What he says, now we have to consider the chemical affinity of certain elements to the disease. So we have to find it out which are the elements which have the same variety of destructive processes. In other words, the foreordained homeopathicity. So you have to find it out the correlation between the syphilitic remedies and syphilitic miasm on one side. If sulfur is the remedy that most clearly typifies the Soric classification, so mercury is the closest remedial synonym for the syphilitic. What he's saying, if sulfur is the remedy that is most clearly typifies the Soric classification, we know sulfur and sora very close. Both of them having the very close relationship at the symptom presentation, very commonly. So there are many more symptoms which you can get with the sulfur, which are present in the soric maya. Same is true when you apply mercury to it. So mercury is the closest remedial synonym for syphilitic miasm. So king of syphilitic miasm, it is the mercury, we know. We find mercury in the higher range of elements. In fact, from osmium, atomic weight 76 onwards, we may consider the proven range of antisyphilitic remedy. So see, below the 53 atomic weight, all elements are there. They take part in construction. They are not destructive. And above the 76 atomic weight, whatever the elements are there, they are more destructive and they are close to the syphilitic miasm. So right from osmium is having 76 atomic weight. From osmium onwards, he says that they are syphilitic. Reference to the homeopathic materia medica will give us a clear outline of symptomatology of the osmium, iridium, platinum, aurum, mercury, plumbum, bismuth, radium, and uranium. We have all those remedies in our materia medica. If we read those remedies, we'll find that they are absolutely syphilitic remedies. We have not sufficient provings of some of other elements in this range, but we often find some of the remedies indicated in this condition that come in lower or constructive register. How are we to account for this? So there are certain elements generally which comes or takes part in construction, but why and how, that we have to think. Generally, all remedies which are there, they are all destructive. So we know the aurum more destructive. Aurum, you get the bony affections. Aurum, the syphilitic mind, that a self-contempt and self-destruction, suicidal tendencies, aurum, destructive process. Same is true with Mercury. Mercury wants to kill others, but again a destruction. Plumbum, very typical paralytic remedy, a syphilitic remedy. Bismuth, we have learned. Radium and uranium, as we know, that these are the remedies which are more destructive. Millikan, Thornton, and Lawrence of the University of California reported before the National Academy of Sciences in 1935 that they had developed a process whereby certain of the lower elements had been made radioactive. This end was accompanied by breaking through the enormously higher energy barrier that surrounds the nucleus of the atom. And for this purpose, they employed a special apparatus perfected with purpose, perfected for the purpose with very low amperage and very high voltage. Copper and sodium chloride were both made artificially radioactive, and the sodium chloride remains radioactive in the solution even when injected into the tissue. So see, the Millikan and all those his partners, they have made one experiment. The elements which now never throws away radioactivity, they started showing that after a lot of pressure or lot of rays have been applied on them, this is nuclear division, and that's why they become radioactive. The commonest example of it, sodium chloride. Sodium has a positive affinity, and chlorine is having the negative. And they, in the solution, have this specific radioactivity, because of which they performs their functions. So, even though they are very mild radioactive, they takes part in the construction and they works for the release of ATP in our body. They are quoted as stating further, a single drop of water contains enough energy to supply 200 horsepower continuously for a year. But at present, it takes more energy to break into the atom than is released. When this ratio can be reversed, atomic energy will be available. One more thing which Millikan has said, one drop of water has how much energy? 200 horsepower continuously working for 1 hour, 1 year. This much energy is saturated. But to break the hydrogen and oxygen atom from that, it takes more energy to liberate the energy of that. And that's why this is not possible. Millikan says of more common and lighter elements such as sodium, for instance, man can probably learn to disintegrate them, but he will always do it by the sweat of his brow. Very commonly he has said, very nicely he has said, that man can probably learn to disintegrate them, but as will always do it by the sweat of his brow. And here again, we see that radioactivity and disintegration are common thought, and this applies equally to the syphilitic stigma. So when we utilize our energy, when we run, when we play something, when we do a cycling, when we do a Surya Namaskar, whatever it may be, what happens? There is a release of energy, and that with that release, you find it out more sweating on your brows, and that sweating more commonly contains the sodium ions, chloride ions, and which that sweating is salty because of sodium and chloride. See, this is how it happens inside our body, and this disintegration inside the body happens because it works like that in physiological condition. But in destructive process, this thing, instead of physiological reaction, we start getting the pathological. Now, no, what he says over there, we frequently find a patient susceptible to the action of natrum in potentized form, that is, in the form in which the energies have been released by applied force in the form of succussion, who has partaken repeatedly and frequently of salt in diet with no appreciable vital effect. This paragraph, or these last two, three paragraphs, he tries to explain that why homeopathic medicine works. When we potentize the remedy. During that process, the energy gets liberated. If we treat, we potentize the natramure starts showing its radioactivity. The energy is getting released, and natramure 1x, 2x, 3x, 6x, or 12x, 30x, or 30C, 12C, 1M, all those potencies carries much more energy in them in natramure, even though there is no natramure present over there. This is in fact the power, this is in fact the energy which gets liberated, and that's why it acts. The same natramure we used to eat in daily diet, but without causing any change over there. We never get symptoms of it. But as soon as we start taking the natramure in 30, we get certain symptomatology like headache, one-sided headache, the congestion of the brain. All those symptoms starts developing. So because of release of energy from the substance by the process of either succussion, either a trituration, the substance which was taking part in the construction can become radioactive and works for as a remedy. 8. In the continued attack by the force and motion upon the construction of sodium atom, these energies have been released so that substance is changed in its very essential, and it takes on and retains an artificial radioactivity which activates it for considerable period of time. So this is the way our medicines works. The radioactivity which has released, the energy is released, and the acts on the human body. So it is with many other substances seemingly inert in their natural state, which can an activity, which take on activity under the homeopathic potentiation. So last 3-4 paragraphs here are mentioned related with why and how homeopathic remedies acts, and the scientific explanation he has tried his level best to give it to you in order to understand how this radioactivity works for it. So this is these 4 paragraphs. You write over there why and how our homeopathic remedy, potentized remedies, works. So this chapter he has given 2 important things. First, one postulate, higher the atomic weight of the substance or element, more syphilitic is the remedy. That is the postulate. And second important thing which he has mentioned over there, a scientific explanation how those substances which are inert in their nature in crude form becomes potentized by releasing the energy over there or radioactive energy over there. So this chapter we have finished one more miasm, that is syphilitic miasm. So there are 3 chapters, 26, 27, 28 devoted to the syphilitic miasm. We have learned them in depth. Tomorrow we'll start with the psychotic miasm, the third important miasm. So that's all for today. Thank you being there. We'll meet again tomorrow. Good evening.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Have a good evening.
Thank you.